Overthinkers of Reddit, what unlikely scenario actually came true that you were completely prepared for because you are an overthinker? Not me, but my mother. Apparently at a party, where my parents and their friends were playing board games, there was a realization that an Haglas was missing from one of the games they planned on playing. My mother proceeded to reach into her purse and pull out an Haglas she just so happened to bring, on the off chance they didn't have one. However, later in the night, when some drinks had been had, someone accidentally slammed a drink down, breaking my mother's Haglas. Without missing a beat, she reached into her purse and pulled out another Haglas. She knew the first one, being glass, might get broken, so she had a backup ready. I carry scissors in my glove compartment. They came in handy when a kid tightened a skinny zip tie around my 9-year-old's finger at a park. Completely cut off the circulation. Also the other kid's mom was a nurse, so that was helpful too. Carry scissors and a nurse at all times. This was at 9 years old. We had driven home and seen the beginning wisps of smoke for the California Cedar Fire in 2003. Naturally, I assumed the worst, and packed up all my clothes, and spent about an hour making a travel cage for my guinea pigs. I tied their water bottle to the side so they could drink, packed up their food and their favorite furniture just in case. I then spent the next few hours monitoring the fire on the news and out in the distance from our window, periodically asking my parents if we needed to evacuate. At some point in the night the fire sped up like crazy and was literally on the hillside across the street. I went into my parents' room and said, "The fire is across the street, are you sure we shouldn't evacuate?" At this point we all went crazy grabbing important documents and supplies, and as we were about to lock the doors and drive, I realized I forgot my guinea pigs. My parents told me it was too late, and I didn't have time to grab them, but when I cried and explained I had them packed up, I was able to grab them and go. The house ended up okay thanks to a neighbor putting out embers before they took, but we were gone long enough my pigs wouldn't have made it. TLDR, helped save my family and pets from a fire because I was an anxious child. I bought and learned to use a Slim Jim (open locked cars). I carry one in my car, and have been able to help no less than 10 people who have locked their keys in their car. My brother was visiting me from out of town and he needs something from Target. He called me, and said an elderly man had locked his keys in his car, and I was able to drive over and help. Also have jumper cables that have helped start a few stranded drivers. Went through a stage as a teenager, where I thought I was psychic. I know, stupid. A friend asked me jokingly to make a prediction. I told him to get a flashlight, because tomorrow would be dark. I grabbed one myself when I got home, and put it in my purse. No idea why, just did it. The next day the Eastern Seaboard blackouts happened. He still asks for predictions to this day. I carry a fire extinguisher in my auto. I witnessed a car accident where the engine caught fire. I quickly put it out before it burned the inside of the car. Everyone survived. In college on occasion upperclassmen would randomly steal the underclassmen towels from the shower stalls, and then lock their room doors, so they had to go to the RA bar. I had the idea to stash a towel in the drop ceiling tiles for just that event. Maybe a week later I became the victim of a towel snatching. However, the upperclassmen were very unhappy to see me strut out with a nice clean towel from my ceiling stash. I always keep an unopened deck of cards in my backpack. You never can tell when some hold'em may be needed to pass the time. But when I was at a business conference the bigwig who was presenting to us was having to wing it with a few things because his luggage had been lost and he didn't have all of his materials. He had the PowerPoint deck, but he didn't have his props. He started going into explaining how he'd be able to demonstrate this statistical principle he was describing, only he didn't have the unopened deck of cards he needed. Voila. I was able to produce a shrink-wrapped deck of cards. My boss was also in the same presentation, and he was also impressed that I just happened to have a deck of cards on me, so that's nice, too. I am an amateur clarinetist. I've played in the local orchestra and the like. My son was in the high school band, also played clarinet. Prior to a football game, at the warm-up area, he called me as I was about to head to the game, saying that someone in his section had a problem with their instrument, so did I have a loaner. Now the thing about being a clarinet player is that everyone you know calls you every time they see a cheap plastic clarinet for sale at a garage sale or the like. So over the years, especially when my son was in JR and SR high, when I saw one of these for $50 or $100 I grabbed it. didn't happen every day, but at the peak of my collection, I had a couple of beta plastic clarinets, in addition to the pretty good wooden one my son played, and Lord knows I wouldn't trust anyone with my good clarinets in BB&A I used in the orchestra. So I grabbed both of these plastic jobs, which actually played okay, and brought them. I pulled the one I thought was the better of the two out of the car, and gave it to my son's friend. Meanwhile, he says hey, another person ran into a problem, and I got the second clarinet out of the car. How many clarinets do you have? Was my son's question. It was a proud moment. Edit wow, thanks for all these awards and upvotes. It helps confirm I really am bananas. Getting lost in a foreign country. Relying on phone GPS to navigate, data stops working, had over-prepared and memorized the map of the downtown area ahead of time. I am basically blind without my glasses, and I've always taken a backup pair of glasses when I travel. It went untouched for years, taking up valuable space in my luggage. Lo and behold, one trip to Montreal a few years ago I just woke up one morning to find my glasses broken, no idea how it happened. And I finally got a chance to break out my backup pair. Came for the validation, did not disappoint. Will forever bring way too much stuff everywhere just in case. Edit. Wow, thanks all. Ironic, I should have been more prepared for these accolades. Injuring my dominant hand as a kid, I had an irrational fear of having it chopped off. I spent all of grade 6 teaching myself to write and do things with my left hand. I made a conscious effort to remain as ambidextrous as possible. As an adult I broke a few fingers on my dominant hand, but it wasn't a big issue because I could do most things equally with my left hand. Anticlimactic, but it was useful. Lol edit. Thanks for the rewards folks. Edit 2. Spelling. When I was 11, I always kept approximately 12 to 15 of some combination of pens, pencils, and markers in my pant pocket. Just liked having options, and never knew what I was going to need to write on. Sometimes got some side eye from other kids though. Cut to at a weekend camp with a bunch of kids, I'm participating in a sort of scavenger hunt race thing. At one point our teams hits this task, where everyone has to draw or write something, don't really remember. But there's only 2 pens, about 10 people per team, and another team just showed up. With 1 pen assigned to each team, it's going slow, until, you get a pen. You get a pen. Everybody gets a pen. Our team screams through the task, because we can all write simultaneously, while the other team's left plodding along with their 1 pen. We eventually win. Who's weird now? Edit. For those concerned about cheating, I believe the lack of pens was oversight, but the event planners, not a deliberate means of handicapping teams. There was a staff members monitoring that particular station and they didn't intervene. Our victory was sanctioned and still stands. Edit 2. Some people have expressed concern over the possibility of my getting impaled by all these writing utensils. Rest assured that this 100% has happened to me. I have absolutely impaled legs and fingertips multiple times. It was terrible. The death of a family member. OCD. When overthinking turns into repeatedly mourning for family who are still alive, because how would I feel if I never get to see them again? I was once driving on the highway behind a car with a couple of kayaks strapped to the roof. My anxious brain kept saying, what if they fall off the car, Final Destination style? I tried to convince myself that it was an irrational fear, but the anxiety got the better of me, and I decided to change lanes and make some distance. About 30 seconds later, cue kayaks. They both slip off the roof and go rolling around the highway. Luckily no one was hurt, but man, that did not help my anxiety at all. Edit to address some comments. 1. I figured I was overthinking since I don't know anyone else who gets nervous or avoids driving behind cars with loads, but I see now that maybe my behavior wasn't so weird. 2. Apparently a lot of you have seen falling kayaks on the highway. I don't think this is the same exact incident as any of the ones you guys have described. 3. From comments about how to properly tie down a kayak, I think these were not properly secured. I don't think they were tied to the bumpers. What would I do if my neighbor's house caught on fire? I said, I'd make sure my kids were safe and panic, and then we'd run if the fire got close. My neighbor's house caught on fire and I sat outside and watched it with my kids and panicked. I work in childcare and was working at a center that was so draining. I started applying for new jobs and went on a couple interviews. One time, I had an interview with another daycare and was offered the position. I loved my coworkers and ultimately decided to turn the new position down. However, I had this gut feeling that I couldn't burn any bridges in case shit at my current job hit the fan. So when I turned down the new job, I made up an excuse saying I'd love to take the offer, but couldn't because of this reason, but would be in the touch sometime in the future. Lo and behold, a couple of weeks later, shit hit the fan at my work. I took a month off and then emailed the job that offered me a position and started 2 weeks later. When I had a tumor removed a couple years ago, I kept the surgical blue vomit bag thing they gave me just in case, in my car in case anyone ever got sick while I'm driving. Last winter I was on a third date, driving on the highway back home with her, and she was feeling like she was going to throw up, could not find the blue vomit bag, felt dumb, telling her where to look when it was in my center console all along. She ended up ralphing in a grocery bag that luckily didn't break. Overthought and forgot. Mace. A person I worked with was a registered sex offender, and he had a thing for me. I told him multiple times that he made me feel uncomfortable and to stay away from me. For some reason I had nightmares about this dude. He was 6.5 feet tall and fucking hideous. Anyways, he said he was going to stop at a store that I stopped at all the time after work, and it was obvious he knew my direction when I left. I pull up to this store and he's already there, walks up to my car, and I just roll down my window and spray this dude, and he dropped a billy club out of his sleeve. Everyone always told me to stop being paranoid and stop thinking he's going to attack me or rape me, that he's been to jail and learned his lesson. Fuck that dude. He should have never been let out of prison. For reference, I'm also a 6 foot tall dude who is always prepared for the worst.